You are standing on the bank of the Nile at dawn, and the smell reaches you before the sight does. Iron, rot, the thick, sweet stench of fish dying by the thousands. You look down, and the river Egypt calls the giver of all life, is the color of blood. It moves slow and red against the reeds. Along the mud, frogs are already gathering, driven up out of water they can no longer breathe in. Behind you rises the greatest civilization the world has ever seen. Stone temples that scrape the sky, granaries swollen with grain, an army no kingdom on earth can stand against. And at the center of it all, a man the people call a living God. You think you know this story. The frogs, the locusts, the darkness. A children's tale of 10 strange disasters and one stubborn king. You don't. Because what happened in Egypt was not a string of random plagues. It was a demolition, carried out in a deliberate order, aimed one by one at every god the most powerful empire on earth had ever bowed to, until it reached the throne itself. Before we begin, set aside what you think you remember. The plagues were not chaos. They were a map, and they moved down that map in a precise order, from the river to the soil, to the sky, to the sun, to the throne. The first person to call it the work of God was not Moses. It was Pharaoh's own magicians. The disasters did not fall on everyone. Again and again, the land where God's people lived was left untouched, and Egypt was forced to watch the difference. There is a real debate about which Pharaoh sat on that throne, and we are not going to pretend it is settled. And the night the empire finally broke, what saved a household was not strength or wealth or wisdom. It was blood brushed across a wooden door. Hold on to that door. The whole Bible is going to come back to it. To understand what was unraveled, you first have to feel how strong it was. The Egypt of the Exodus sits at the height of what historians call the New Kingdom, the golden age of Egyptian power, roughly the 15th to the 13th centuries before Christ. This is not a small desert tribe. This is the superpower of the ancient world. Its armies reach north into Syria and far south into Nubia. Its wealth is the envy of every kingdom around the Mediterranean. Historians describe New Kingdom Egypt, without hesitation, as the dominant empire of its age. Stand in one of its temple courts, and you understand why no one questions it. The columns rise higher than anything you have ever stood beneath. The walls burn with gold and deep blue. Priests move in white linen through clouds of incense, tending gods carved in stone. Gods for the river, gods for the sun, gods for the harvest, gods for childbirth, gods for the very air you are breathing. And above them all stands one figure who is not made of stone. Pharaoh. To Egypt, Pharaoh is not merely a king. He is the living image of the god Horus, the son of the sun god Ra, the man whose word is believed to hold the order of the cosmos in place. When he speaks, a god speaks. When his son is born, a god is born. The throne of Egypt is not a political office. It is a claim about heaven. Now hold that claim in your mind, because everything that follows is going to test it. Into this empire walks a demand, carried by a shepherd with a slow tongue and his brother. 4 words that should be laughable in a throne room like this. Let my people go. And Pharaoh answers exactly the way a god answers a slave. In Exodus chapter 5, he says, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice?" I do not know the Lord. He is about to be introduced. You have seen the temples. Now, look lower. Beneath the gold, holding the whole structure up, are the Hebrews, the children of Israel, descended from Jacob, multiplied into a nation inside a land that was never theirs. For generations, they have made the bricks and hauled the stone. Exodus chapter 1 says their lives were made bitter with hard service, in mortar and in brick. Their God is carved into no temple here. He has no statue on the Nile, no festival on the Egyptian calendar. To Egypt, the God of these slaves is no God at all, the least of all gods, if he is anything. That is the contest you are actually watching. Not Moses against Pharaoh, not magic against magic. It is the unseen God of a slave people against the entire visible pantheon of the mightiest empire on earth. And Egypt is utterly certain how this ends. But God has already told Moses how it ends, and he has told him why. Listen to the purpose, because the plagues are not blind anger. In Exodus chapter 9, God says of Pharaoh, "For this very purpose I have raised you up, to show you my power, and that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth." Centuries later, the Apostle Paul will quote that exact verse in Romans chapter 9 to say something about the God who still rules history. This was never only about freeing slaves. It was about a name, about making the most powerful nation on earth, and everyone watching it say out loud who the real God is. So the first blow falls where Egypt feels most certain. Not at the edges, at the source, at the river Egypt believes is life itself. Everything in Egypt begins with the Nile. Without it, the empire is sand. The Nile floods, the black soil is fed, the grain grows, the people live. So Egypt does what every ancient people does with the thing it cannot live without. It calls the river divine. The Nile has its guardians among the gods, and its yearly flood is received as a gift from heaven. So watch where the first plague lands. Moses lifts his staff over the water, and the Nile turns to blood. The fish die. The river stinks. Exodus chapter 7 says the Egyptians could not drink from it, and they dug along the banks, searching for something clean. For 7 days, the lifeline of the empire is an open wound. Feel what that does to the Egyptian mind. The river they trusted, the river they worshipped, has been touched, and it failed them. Then the second blow, and it rises out of that same river. Frogs. They come up from the Nile and cover the land. They are in the ovens, in the kneading bowls, in the beds. Egypt even pictured one of its goddesses with the head of a frog, a symbol of fertility and new life. And now that symbol of life is a plague crawling across the palace floor, piling up until the dead frogs are gathered in heaps and the whole land reeks of them. And here is the detail most people miss. Pharaoh's magicians can copy this. They turn water to blood. They bring up frogs. Their power is real enough to imitate the sign, but notice what it cannot do. It cannot reverse a single plague. It can only add more frogs to a country already drowning in them. The counterfeit can imitate a judgment. It can never lift one. Pharaoh begs Moses to take the frogs away, the first crack in the God-King's certainty. And the moment they are gone, his heart hardens again. The pattern has begun. The third blow falls, and something changes. Moses strikes the dust, and it becomes gnats, small biting insects swarming over man and beast across all of Egypt. This time, the magicians step forward to copy it. as they have twice before. They work their secret arts, and nothing happens. So they stop, and they turn to Pharaoh and say the most remarkable sentence in the whole confrontation. Exodus chapter 8. This is the finger of God. Sit with that. The first people in this story to name what is happening are not the Israelites. They are Pharaoh's own court magicians, the professional defenders of Egypt's gods, and they are telling their god king that they have hit the edge of their power and run straight into someone else's. Pharaoh will not listen, but his own experts already know. Then the fourth plague, swarms of flies, and with it, God draws a line he will hold for the rest of the story. In Exodus chapter 8, he says, "He will set apart the land of Goshen, where his people live, so that no swarms of flies shall be there." The flies fill Egypt. Goshen stays clean. That distinction is the quiet center of the whole account. The plagues are not blind forces of nature rolling over a region. They are aimed. They land here and not there. They obey a line drawn by God, so that, in his own words, you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. Egypt is being made to watch the difference between the people under its gods and the people under the living God. By now, a shape is emerging: the river, the soil, the creatures of the dust. The judgment is climbing, and it has not yet reached the things Egypt prizes most: its wealth, its sky, its sun. The fifth blow strikes the wealth of Egypt directly. A severe pestilence falls on the livestock in the field: the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, and the flocks. In the ancient world, livestock is not sentiment. It is currency, food, transport, and military power all at once. And Egypt kept cattle among its sacred animals. The gentle cow was an image of one of its great goddesses, and a sacred bull was honored as a god in its own right. So when the herds of Egypt drop dead in the fields while Israel's cattle live, and Exodus chapter 9 says not one of the animals belonging to the Israelites died, the loss is not only economic. The sacred animal lies dead in the dirt, and it could not even save itself. The sixth blow lands on the body. Moses throws soot from a furnace into the air, and it becomes boils breaking out in open sores on man and beast. And here is a detail the text almost says under its breath: the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. The men who once mimicked the signs can no longer even appear in the room. Egypt had its gods and patrons of healing. Not one of them closes a single wound. Then, the seventh blow comes out of the sky: hail, the heaviest hail in the history of Egypt, mixed with fire that runs along the ground, shattering trees, flattening the crops in the field. And again, listen for the line. In Goshen, where the people of Israel were, there was no hail. Now, before we go any further, a fair question, the one careful viewers always ask: when did this happen, and who was this Pharaoh? Here we should simply be honest. Scholars genuinely debate it. Some read the Bible's own timeline and place the Exodus in the 15th century before Christ. Others point to the storehouse cities of Pithom and Ramesses and argue for a later king. It is a real and unsettled discussion, and we are not going to hand you a false certainty just to make the story tidier. The Bible's claim was never about which crown sat on the throne. It is about who actually rules the sky that just fell on it. What the hail leaves standing, the eighth blow devours. An east wind blows all that day and through the night, and by morning the locusts come. So many they darken the ground. They eat every green thing the hail had spared, every leaf, every blade, until Exodus chapter 10 says nothing green remained, not a tree, not a plant, in all the land of Egypt. The granaries that made Egypt the envy of the world are being emptied by insects. The harvest gods Egypt trusted to fill its storehouses stand silent while the storehouses go bare. And then the ninth blow, and it is the most audacious of them all. Moses stretches out his hand toward heaven, and darkness covers the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be felt for 3 days. No one rises from his place, no lamp, no torch, no dawn. Understand what that means in this country. The sun is not just warmth here. The sun is Ra, among the greatest gods of all, and the divine father of Pharaoh himself. For 3 days, the chief god of Egypt is simply switched off over his own land, while, and the text is careful to say it, all the people of Israel had light in the places where they lived. The sun god cannot light a single Egyptian street. The god of the slaves lights every Hebrew home. Now, this is the point where a careful, skeptical mind asks whether all of this could be natural, and that deserves a fair answer. Some scholars have proposed a chain reaction, a red bloom that fouls the river, driving out the frogs, breeding the insects, spreading disease, ending in storms and dark. It is worth taking seriously, and we will not wave it away. But notice what such a theory cannot explain. The plagues arrive and depart on Moses' announced word. They fall on Egypt and spare Goshen, street by street. And no natural cycle in history has ever ended by taking the firstborn of a nation in a single night. The text is not describing weather. It is describing aim. And the aim has one target left. Everything has been climbing to this. The river, the soil, the livestock, the sky, the sun. One by one, every power Egypt called divine has been answered and silenced. Only one claim is still standing. The throne, the man who calls himself a living God, and the firstborn son who is meant to be a god after him. And God says the contest ends there. But before the last blow falls, something happens that changes everything. Because this time God's people are not simply spared by an invisible line. This time they are told to do something. In Exodus chapter 12, every Hebrew household is to take a lamb without blemish and kill it at twilight and brush its blood across the 2 doorposts and the top of the door. And God says, "When I see the blood, I will pass over you." Think about what is being asked. They are not saved by being stronger than death. They are not saved by being better than Egypt. They are saved by standing behind the blood of a lamb that died in their place. The same family that has been beaten and enslaved is now told that the only thing between them and that final night is a smear of blood on wood. And then it comes. At midnight, the Lord strikes down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the firstborn of the slave who is behind the mill. And there is a great cry in Egypt, for there is not a house where someone is not dead. Hear the verse the whole story has been moving toward. Exodus chapter 12. On all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. That is what actually broke that night. Not only a king's heart, not only a nation's grip on its slaves. What broke was the claim that the river was God, that the sun was God, that the man on the throne was God. In one night, the most powerful empire on earth is brought to its knees in the dark, weeping over its dead, while a people it had owned walk out free. And they walk out behind blood. A lamb, slain, its blood marking the door of everyone who lives. Egypt is left counting its gods, every one of them defeated. Israel is left holding the memory of a lamb. Hold on to that lamb, because it does not stay in Egypt. It would be easy to close the book here and call it ancient history. A strong empire, a stubborn king, 10 strange disasters, a very long time ago. But the Bible itself will not let the plagues stay in the past. The poets keep returning to them. Psalm 78 and Psalm 105 walk back through the blood, the frogs, the locusts, the darkness, the firstborn. Generations later, not as a horror story, but as proof that their God keeps his word. Even Israel's enemies remember. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, the Philistines panic at the very name of this God. These, they say, are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every kind of plague, and the lamb at the center of that last night never disappears. It moves through the whole of Scripture. The blood on the doorpost becomes the Passover that Israel keeps for 3,500 years. And when John the Baptist sees Jesus walking toward him, the words he reaches for are not new ones. Behold, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. Paul says it plainly, Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. The door in Egypt was pointing at a cross the whole time. There is even a strange echo waiting at the far end of the Bible. In the book of Revelation, when God's final judgments fall, they come wearing familiar clothes. Water turned to blood, sores, darkness, great hail, a sky full of locusts. The plagues, it turns out, were never only about Egypt. They were a preview of what it looks like when God at last sets the whole world right. So here is what I would leave you with. In Exodus chapter 10, God tells Moses why he is doing all of this, so that you may tell your children and your grandchildren, and that you may know that I am the Lord. This story was given to be handed down, examined, asked about, and learned again by every single generation. It was never meant to be a closed book. So let me hand you the question Egypt was forced to answer the hard way. Every household in Egypt was trusting something to keep it safe that night. The river, the sun, the throne, their own strength. Only one thing actually held: blood on a wooden door. What are you trusting to hold? And where, in your own Bible, does that door appear again?